Howdy fellas. In the past we've talked about muzzle loading firearms. Today I thought we'd skip forward in time just a bit and talk about the first repeating arm adopted by the United States Army. During the American Civil War there were repeating rifles used in addition to the muzzle loaders. The most recognizable probably to you guys would be the Henry and the Spencer rifles, and there were others. The American Army was hesitant to adopt a repeating firearm for a number of years after the Civil War, on the simple concern that they thought that the soldiers would waste ammunition. And if you look at the statistics from the Vietnam War, there were some 15,000 to 17,000 rounds of ammunition fired to each enemy casualty. So, maybe that thinking had some logic in it. But however, on down in, well, as a matter of fact, as early as 1869, the Swiss military adopted a bolt-action rifle called the Verdi. And in the 1880s, a lot of the other militaries of the world started adopting bolt-action rifles, repeating rifles. And one example is showing how a repeating rifle against a single-shot rifle, such as the 1873 trapdoor Springfield, was the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The United States 7th Cavalry was armed with trapdoor Springfields. However, the Indians had a lot of repeating rifles like the 1866 Winchester, and that was a very unfair fight, not only by the number of Indians attacking the cavalry, but by the fact that the cavalry didn't have the ability to return the rate of fire that the Indians had. So in the early 1890s, the American military really got serious about adopting a bolt-action rifle, a repeating rifle. So around 1892, if my memory serves me correct, there was a field trial of about 22 various arms that were submitted for testing, and the top 4 of those were the German Mauser, the Swedish Schmidt-Reuben, the British Lee, and the Krag Jorgensen, which is a Norwegian rifle. And in the end, the Krag Jorgensen won out for several reasons. Number one being it had a very, very unique loading system. And the particular gun we're looking here is an 1898 Springfield. You'll notice the box magazine is on the side of the gun. To load it, you simply flip that lever open and drop the cartridges in, close the gate, and it stacked them properly so they would feed up into the chamber of the gun. The military really liked that feature because they thought it would be easier to load on the move or on the run. But of course you had the disadvantage, and we learned that later on, we'll talk about that in a minute, was most of the rifles that were developed had a notch back here in the rear of the receiver that took a stripper clip. The rounds were simply pushed into the internal box magazine. One of the advantages of the Krag, though, was that you could top off the magazine without ever opening the bolt, which was one of the features they considered on that. And it was chambered for the 30 U.S. or 30 government, which in civilian terms that would be the 30-40 Krag. And by the nomenclature of 30-40, it sounds like that was a black powder cartridge, such as 45-70, which would be a 45 grain bullet with 70 grains of black powder. But in this case, it was a 30 caliber bullet, 40 grains of smokeless or nitrocellulose powder. That was really coming into vogue about this time. They're getting away from the black powder arms. It was a whole lot faster moving projectile than the 45-70, which was a distinct improvement over the 45-70. But we found out later in the Spanish-American War, when our troops had to face the Spanish Mauser with the 7mm by 57mm projectile with a Spitzer pointed bullet, that we were somewhat outmatched. We wound up winning that conflict, and the Springfield, or Craig Jorgensen, was made, well, matter of fact, because all the companies that submitted their rifles in the Final Four, and in the end, the Norwegian Craig being adopted, there was a lot of squabble from the domestic makers over the fact that it was a foreign-made rifle. So the actual adaptation or production of this gun did not get into big numbers until 1894. Your first model of the Craig Jorgensen was the 1894 Springfield. And between 1894 and 1899, there were various improvements to the gun. And these were made from 1894 to 1904, which, as many of you may know, that in 1903, we adopted the 1903 Springfield. But what was funny about that some of the features from the Craig carried over to the '03 Springfield. Number one being, and this gun does not have it, because when I first found this gun, I thought I had found a carbine version of the gun, but a quick check of the serial numbers revealed that it was simply a gun that someone had sporterized. It should have a wood handguard on here, and the sight would be on top of the handguard. So what happened, whoever sporterized this gun cut the barrel down and removed the handguard and replaced it with some marble sights. But the gun, and this again goes back to their concern over soldiers wasting ammunition. And like I said, this one doesn't have it because the previous owner, or the person that customized it, took the magazine cut off of it. Simply what that was a switch right here, if you will, that when you put it up, it cut the magazine off, and the gun functioned as a single shot, even though there were cartridges in the magazine. It would only allow, it would not feed, that is, another round up into the chamber. It would simply skip over it. So you loaded a single shot, and that was their logic was behind that. If you were not being mass charged or attacked, that you would use the gun as a single shot, and then if you had a mass charge or had to do an attack on the other enemy soldiers, that you would flip that down to allow it to pick up cartridges out of the magazine. That carried over to the 1903 Springfield. In addition, the safety operates the same on the '03 as it does on the Craig. And then also, when this gun is unloaded, you notice it has a cocking knob. In other words, you could carry the gun uncocked with a round in the chamber, and then when you got ready to fire, you simply pull the cocking lever back. That carried over to the Springfield. And just a note on the Springfield, it was so similar to the Mausers that Mauser brought a lawsuit against Springfield Armory and eventually won. So every '03 Springfield that was produced, Mauser got a fee off that, because it was kind of a copyright infringement in a lot of ways. These guns are noted for having a very, very smooth action, probably one of the most smooth actions out there. But its one shortcoming was it was a rather weak system, because it only had one locking lug. So you couldn't or wouldn't want to rechamber a gun like this to a more high intensity or higher pressure cartridge like the 30-06 because of that only one locking lug. Two is better. But these were fine old guns, and they served us well. As a matter of fact, I believe that two companies of engineers in World War II were armed with these Springfield rifles, between probably model 1899, I would have guessed, but it could have been some of the older ones as well. No documentation that they were used in combat. But, you know, like I say, it was a vast improvement over what we had. It did yeoman service for 10 plus years, and it's just a neat old gun. And I thank you guys for watching. And as always, keep your powder dry, mind your top knot, Pilgrim.